So we were able to collect all this sleep data specifically before and after the hurricane, and like the post-traumatic stress symptoms children were experiencing. And we were specifically looking at if your chronotype, which is like your morning or evening preference, impacts how well you cope, at least as a kid, which was really interesting. We hadn't found anything like it, especially in terms of like coping with traumatic events.
Welcome to Coffee and Geography, where my guests and I geek out about the world and everything on it, discovering that we are all geographers in some way, shape or form. I'm your host, Kit, and my pronouns are they, them or she, her. So settle down with a brew, hit that subscribe or follow button, and enjoy the listen.
This podcast is sponsored by the World Energy and Meteorology Council, or WEMC for short. WEMC is an international organisation focused on weather and climate data to support energy transition, and we also work with educators. WEMC have created Teal, an easy-to-use free visualisation tool that enables you to explore climate variables for the past 70 plus years. Get started at tealtool.earth. Find us at wemcouncil.org and follow us on Twitter at wemcouncil.
Hello everybody, welcome to Coffee and Geography. This is so amazing. We were just chatting in the green room, me and this person, and the last time I saw this person was, and this is going to be a bit strange, right? Do you know I keep saying that, an ex-high school student of mine, I hadn't seen them since high school. This is actually sort of half true, because I saw this person last 10 years ago when she was a high school student in the United States of America. So I didn't teach her myself, but Alexis Bahn. Hi!
Hello, yes. Yeah, it has been high school, since high school.
It's crazy. And I'll tell you what, folks, this is absolutely incredible. We'll quickly talk about this before the introduction, right? But Alexis, when she was a high school student, did meet some of my high school students. So Alexis, and some folks on the podcast have, quote unquote, met some of these people. So
wow.
you tell the people listening. So who were these folks that you met?
So it's been a while, but
yeah.
They were your students that were, I believe they were in your class that you brought over to visit our sanctuary, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's right. It was just so amazing. And like you folks got on like really, really well. It was so cool just to see this group of teenagers who I've known and who I've annoyed, and they've annoyed me so many times. And then they come to the Howlers Inn, which we'll come back to in a minute, folks. And then meet Alexis and Delaney, and then like you guys just hit it off. And there were some other folks there staying at your B&B who had kids, and it was just quite fun. And like most of the time, rather than watching the Wolves, they were like hanging out with you, like chatting.
Yes, I do remember this now. It's kind of coming back in bits and pieces.
Well, folks, I've just teased a few things here. So to introduce Alexis, this is really cool. Alexis was raised by wolves, but now she studies the brain. Alexis loves questions about how we learn, what happens while we sleep, and how our emotions affect all of it. She has lived and studied in the mountains of Montana, the deserts of Texas, and the rolling hills of the Netherlands. But as she puts here, the mountains will always be her favorite. You sound very nostalgic for Montana, Alexis.
Oh, I am. Definitely after living in Texas for a little while. I need my mountains.
Chalk and cheese must be, surely.
Yes.
So, because when you went to, so you're originally from Bozeman, Montana, which is how we met each other.
Yes.
Which is, so very quick backstory, folks, is that when my wife's family has a house in Bridget Canyon, which some of you know, out in Bozeman, Montana. And I always say, Alex, I always joke that it will be where you used to live and where my family's house is going to be the exact spot where Zefram Cochrane builds the Phoenix for Star Trek First Contact in 2063. So that's my head canon. So we can all stay at the Howlers Inn and then watch Zefram Cochrane's Phoenix. Anyway, enough of that. And so what happened there, folks, is that I fell in love with not just my wife, but also the place and Bridget Canyon, and we decided to get married out there. So in 2006, we were scoping around about where people could stay, and we came across the Howlers Inn, which was a bed and breakfast. But as the name suggests, it also was a wolf sanctuary. And And that's how. And then we came over. We came had a look. You allowed us to pet the wolf cubs as they were at the time. Kiowa and all those. Oh my god, and Comanche, as when they were little pups. And then we became good friends. And you actually came to my wedding reception. You, your sister, and your mum and dad. So the following year.
Yes, we did. Is it bad? I also forgot that, but we did do that.
It's been so long, Alexis. I mean, 2007. I mean, crikey, it's a long time ago. So, let's first start off with the Wolf Sanctuary, the Howlers Inn. I mean, what an incredible place to grow up in. Surely, I mean, tell folks what the Howlers Inn was and kind of what your experience was being a kid growing up in that environment.
I mean, I guess it's kind of the only childhood I knew, so I don't have anything to compare it to, but it was still pretty amazing. So it was a wolf sanctuary and a bed and breakfast. So we took in wolf pups that, needed a home. We raised them. They lived as a pack with us. Well, not in our house, but outside in their enclosure. I've gotten to meet people from everywhere. I made a lot of friends like yourself and your family. It's just been incredible.
For clarity for everybody, these are not, you could probably imagine, because I would, I'd be a bit trepidatious, like speaking to someone who would like capture wolves and save them for a bed and breakfast. It's not what happens here. So how do these wolves come to stay at Howlers Inn?
It kind of a mix of different ways. I think all the wolves that we brought in personally while we owned it came from a sanctuary or a breeding facility for wild and exotic animals in Montana. And they did a lot of breeding for like zoo programs that didn't have it, or, other educational facilities, things like that. Kiowa and Comanche, the two pups that you met, we got because they had been asked for like an insane number of wolves for some facility somewhere. And then after all the wolves had become pregnant at their breeding facility, the order got canceled and they had 15 puppies with no home. So we took on 2 of them to kind of start a fresh pack, if you will. And there were other wolves that came just from like illegal ownership, or, they were seized from, I think, like a roadside zoo or something. That's not as common.
Yeah. And my goodness, you like to try and start a pack, you said, and my goodness, they were pretty successful, I would say. They didn't do too badly, those wolves.
No, they did pretty well. Yeah.
And one thing that so just to give a lovely mention to your parents, so Chris and Mary Martha, who wonderful human beings, and also and your sister as well. Let's not forget Delaney. Hi, Delaney. So off to being a sports star somewhere. So your parents actually helped contribute to a piece of performance poetry. Back in was it 2019? Yeah, that's right. So I did it at a conference, a teaching conference, and I think it was your dad. This is the 20th of December 2014. Sent me this thing about what he wrote about Kiowa, because it was very, very sad news on the 20th of December 2014 that Kiowa, at the ripe age of just 7 years of age, had a fatal seizure and died during the night, which was very, very sad. Who was your alpha female. And I just want to read a passage, if you will, Alexis, for what your dad said, because it just goes to show the emotional connection and the investment that you folks as a family put into these wolves. So this is what your dad said. He said, Kaya was an amazing wolf and one of the first 2 that Mary Martha and I had hand raised, getting her as a pup just a few weeks old. She was as wolfy as a wolf in captivity could be, and she was a strong female presence. She would stay away from any person she could, but her stare would make anyone back down. As wolfy as she was, Kiowa was extremely affectionate with our family. Mary Martha often referred to Kiowa as Daddy's little girl, since she would crawl into our laps and suck on our thumbs at any opportunity, or flop in front of our path for a belly rub. And if the girls, referring to you and Delaney, if the girls went to the fence, she was the first to greet them and always gave them lots of kisses. Oh,
yes. Kiowa and Comanche, I think, were both just amazing wolves.
Yeah. Oh, I can tell by just the reaction, looking at you and your reaction, how much affection you had for those wolves, how much love and care you had for them. And yeah, and Kyle and Comanche, I've still got that picture of me in the wolf pup pen. Like,
Oh,
I think,
yes.
yeah, and I think it was Kaya. Kaya were on her back, like with her paws up in the air and me just like scratching her belly. Yeah, it was so lovely. But then to come back a few years later and see them both in the main pen, and like crikey, they're big. And then my
Yes.
students trying to get them to howl, which was amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, fun times. But it's such an incredible thing, and I was deeply touched by what you did, and it must have been hard work though, both running a bed and breakfast and also looking after those wolves.
Yes, definitely. I mean, to me as a kid, it wasn't. I got all the fun perks and I didn't have to do the work. Yeah. But I do know, especially as I got older and I was a little more aware of what was going on, I could definitely see how much work it took, which is why, they eventually left. My mom especially was burned out and tired from it. So it was time.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And it just goes to show that, like, how much commitment, such that, and I called it, that there was definitely conservation work that you folks did, and education work, because everybody who came and visited the Howlers Inn got an education about the wolves, their behavior, how important they are to ecosystems, and it was so great. And yeah, and I just want to, for everybody who's either stayed at Howlers Inn or visited them, I just want to say on behalf of everybody, massive thanks to you and your family for your efforts that you've done. And of course, good luck to, I know they've had it for a few years now, but good luck to the folks who are running it now. And they have as much energy and passion that you folks did, because they need it in buckets.
They do, yes. They just got 2 new puppies and they look just like Kyla and Comanche. It's a little unnerving, but yeah.
Oh, that's so sweet. So let's compare them. Bozeman, Montana, then, so where the Howlers Inn is located, just outside of Bozeman, Montana, with Texas and the Netherlands. I mean, let's go in chronological order. So when you went to Texas to go to university, or college, as you say in the United States, when you got there and you were starting to settle in, did everybody think, oh yeah, you are definitely like the Montanan girl? Like, it was so obvious that you were from Montana, or did you like fit in really, really easily to the cosmopolitan lifestyle? I mean, how was that for you?
I would not say I fit in easily. I think it was a little harder because I was just following my fiance for his university, so I wasn't even in school. Yes. So I was just working. I was on campus working a job, and there were times my coworkers were talking and it was like they were a different country. I was like, I don't know what you're referring to, what you're talking about. I'm so confused. Like, it was wild. I still feel that way sometimes a little bit, but there was a cool moment when I was talking with some of them. And it came up that I had lived at a wolf sanctuary. I'd raised all these wolves. And one of my coworkers said, oh, my niece and nephew are obsessed with wolves. They watched this guy, Coyote Peterson, and he did this video on this place that has wolves in Montana. Do you know it? And I was like, you mean Howlers Inn, like the place that I lived? And it was just this crazy coincidence that they had been trying to go to Howlers Inn for forever. I was like, yeah, I grew up there. Those were my wolves in the video.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's a bit celebrity status there.
I know.
Yeah, well, folks, this is true. The Howlers Inn didn't just transcend across the United States, clearly across the world as well, because you had visitors from local. Oh, that's the other thing as well, is that you didn't just have my parents and my family visit for my wedding. You also, 2 of my best friends came and stayed with you as well, Dan and Julia, a few years after that. So,
yes, I think I remember them a little bit.
And I left a note. I remember I left a note in your mailbox to give to Dan, because me and my wife were in Montana the 3 or 4 weeks beforehand. And I was like, I just put a cheeky note in the mailbox and said, give this to Dan and Julie when they arrive. It was so funny. It was so cool. Yeah. Anyway, we're reminiscing now. So, but you're into, but going back to what you're saying about Texas, it just goes to show how diverse and different parts of the United States are. I mean, it is such a huge country. It is not homogenous in any way, shape, or form. But so in that respect, then, what would you say for you when you were living in Texas was kind of like? Was there something that you really enjoyed about Texas that you would not get back in Montana, or you thought, actually, if I could take this little piece of me back to Montana, if I ever went back to Montana, I would do that? I mean, it's a bit of a tricky question, but
it is a tricky question. I would say, I mean, it kind of depends, because even Texas itself is very different across the state. Because I've been to Austin, which is very different from Lubbock, which is where we live. But I would say universally, the thing I actually, for whatever reason, I really like is like the classic Southern charm. Like, I get called ma'am all the time. Men hold open doors for me. And, I've had the classic like cowboy tip their hat, and outside buildings and things. It's just wild. And obviously that does not really happen in Montana. I think Montanans are very nice people, but it's a very different kind of nice. And I'm a sucker for that charm.
Good point. A very different kind of nice. Yeah. And you know what? It's funny that, because everybody thinks of like the Wild West and like Montana and all that kind of stuff. That's the cowboy nation, Wyoming on the tipping out. But you're saying that actually that doesn't really happen in Montana. That happens down in Texas. So, right, that's very fun. Well, I want to give another shout out to Chris Bell, who's a meteorologist over here in Norwich, who's from Texas. And his wit and his charm is definitely quite unique. He's a lovely guy. I need to get him on the podcast soon. But I can see what you're saying now. But yes, you're not meant to be playing into stereotypes, Alexis. You're not meant to say, the cowboy hat's in Texas and they're tipping their hat. But hey, sometimes some stereotypes are true.
It's true, yeah.
So going back to now your present day, you're close to us here. You're in the Netherlands. You're just across, as I said to your mum and dad in the green room, you're just across the smaller pond now rather than the big pond.
Yes, it's crazy.
What a difference then. How have you been finding over there in the lowlands?
I have to say I love the Netherlands, or at least Maastricht, which is our city. I think a large part of it is it's just very green, and Texas is not. And the bike culture too. I love that I can just get on my bike and stay on a bike path all the way into our town where my university building is. It's like 10 kilometers, but the whole way it's just bike path. It's amazing.
Yeah, the Netherlands are very, very, they're known for three things in particular. So going back to stereotypes now, they're known for their bikes, as you just mentioned. They're known for their windmills, and they're known for their tulips. So
yes.
I mean, amongst other things, but they're the three that come to think of mind, the stereotypes. So you're absolutely right. And the fact that you can cycle that, I mean, that's definitely different from like Montana and Texas. Where you have to get in the car just to go down the road, literally you do. You have to get in the car, it's funny. At my family's house, you have to get in the car to go to the mailbox, unless you're walking the dogs.
Yeah.
So drive through ATMs, everybody.
Had that. Yes.
So that must be almost literally a breath of fresh air as well, to be able to just cycle everywhere.
Yes, definitely.
Have you? I don't know if it's in Maastricht or it's in somewhere else, but isn't there this giant like cycle bridge? It's almost like it could be a road junction which goes in like 8 different directions, but actually it's for bikes only. I don't know where that is. That's somewhere in the Netherlands.
That would sound very, very Dutch. I don't think it's Maastricht, but we do have a lot of bridges over the river, and some are pedestrian only, which is also really cool.
So, okay, have you got on your bike and gone in the other direction, gone like further out of town and just had a little cycle round in the rural areas amongst the tulips? I just said it.
I have a little bit. Like our town is right on the border of Belgium. Like literally you can just look over the river. So I have biked across the river and through Belgium and then back around. And I've biked to a windmill and then through the fields near the windmill and then back home. I've seen the tulips, the classic Keukenhof garden tulips, which were amazing. Yeah.
Oh, with all those deep colors. Yeah. It's so weird. it's like, even though it's so close, and you can get a direct short haul flight from Norwich to Amsterdam, and you can also, there's the ferries that go to, I've never been to the Netherlands, would you believe it or not? Like,
that's crazy.
Yeah, the look on your face. Yeah, it's like, what? Yeah. I've been to Denmark. I've been to Germany. I've been to France, but I've been to Belgium. So I've got this little kind of void where the Netherlands is. I need to kind of fix that sometime. But hey, now that your folks are there, it's going to be a good excuse, surely.
Exactly. Yeah, you have a place to stay and everything.
Yay! Did you say that a bit louder so they can hear you downstairs?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Oh, so good. So, but as you just said, there's you miss the mountains so much. Of course, there aren't any mountains there in the Netherlands. You have to go far south to get towards into France and towards Italy before you get some real big mountains. While you've been over here, Alexis, is there anywhere else in Europe that you've mentioned you cycled through Belgium and stuff like that? But is there anywhere else in Europe you've travelled since you've been over?
I've been to Germany. I went to Aachen and toured around there. I actually just came back from London last weekend, so I was on your side of the sea for a little bit.
Yep.
I know I went somewhere else. I took another trip, but now I'm completely forgetting where I went. That's
cool. Right. So we're going to move on and talk about something which is like really amazing. I mean, we kind of loosely keep in touch through social media anyway, but when you posted about this new thing that you're starting for your masters, I was just like, oh my God, this is, if there is any excuse to get, Alexis or one of your family on the podcast, this was the trigger, right? So
yeah.
You, as we said in the introduction, you love questions about how we learn, what happens with sleep, emotion effects, and things like that. And so you're doing a master's, and do correct me because I'm just remembering off the top of my head, you're doing a master's in psychology. Is that right?
Yes, developmental psychology.
Developmental psychology. But here's the link, everybody. So no, you tell us what your master's focus is going to be on, because it sounds so freaking interesting.
Yeah, well, I feel like I should clarify that what you're referring to, the paper, I actually just did for like fun. It wasn't tied to any schooling or anything.
You did it for fun? That makes it even more cooler. Okay, talk about your masters first and then go into. Okay, folks. So you see, I got so excited, I've conflated two things there. Okay, start with your masters, then we'll go into the bit you did for fun.
So my master's thesis is on different study strategies in students. So analyzing like brain activity while students are learning Swahili in different ways to see, what's going on, what's actually helping them learn the best, things like that, which is very different, but I think it's really interesting.
Wait, okay. So that's so cool in itself. So wait, folks, I'm going to keep you on tender hooks for the thing that I was excited about. Right. In different thing to learn Swahili. That's interesting, because it's like when you said the study skills, I thought, okay, like cognitive stuff with regards to like studying, revision, all that kind of stuff. But okay, about learning Swahili. Yeah,
we're trying to see, in a broad sense, what's going on between two different ways that people learn. So some people, they'll just study everything at once and then they'll take a test or, however they're assessed. But some people will just like mix and match how they're studying things, like different subjects or different categories, and then go test. And there's a lot of research going into like why it works better one way and sometimes another, and things like that. So we're trying to kind of get into that deeper. So I'm looking at motivation to see if motivation type changes how well studying works.
But why Swahili? That's a very specific thing to look at into.
I think that was primarily because it is an international school. And so they're like, we have to find something. We don't think anyone speaks Swahili. It's a new subject for everyone. So it was like a safe thing that no one had previous understanding of, hopefully. That
is amazing. I can't remember who we spoke to, but I was speaking about, I think it was one of my other ex-students, Karis Merriam, where we talked about learning Welsh when you go to when you go to university in Wales. I mean, they run optional courses to learn Welsh, which I thought, and then that's right, because then we had a discussion about, wouldn't it be a great idea is if you go to certain locations where a certain culture or an indigenous culture is located, that you put on a course, it could be optional, whatever it is, where you have to learn about the culture and you learn some of the language, because it gets you more appreciative of the land that you're on. That I think for me, that's more of a respectful way of acknowledging that you may be on occupied land, for example. But yeah, that sounds so cool. So you've got this course where you can learn Swahili, and I love it. Is it popular? Do you know? Are people interested?
I mean, people are interested at least in doing our study for the most part. I don't know if it's necessarily because of the Swahili, to be honest, or if they just know they have to do it for their classes.
Yeah. I would so do it. I mean, I tried to pick up a couple of words and phrases in Chichewa, which is the main language down in Malawi and Zambia, it's so beautiful to just, even if you can only pick up, and I strongly recommend it to everybody. It sounds so tropey that when you go to another country, you try and pick up a couple of words here and there and then the locals can laugh at you. But, I've been told by many people that they actually appreciate the effort, and the fact that you've taken time to kind of learn a couple of words or so means that you're respecting kind of like the culture and the place that you're going to. So yeah, I strongly recommend it for anybody. So when I say Muliwanji, how are you in Chichewa? The people in Malawi are like, oh, that's quite cool, Kit. Well done. Do you know anything else? Like, no. But they appreciate the effort. Hi folks, a chance for you to recharge your brew, but also a polite prod to remind you that it's so easy to support this podcast. Simply liking, sharing, rating and reviewing means that it will get on more people's radar. Also, there are a few links down in the description which may be of mutual benefit. Please do check them out. That's what you're actually doing, folks. So thanks for correcting me. So that's what you're actually doing. But this thing you did for fun, for hobby, so which makes it not less cool. It makes it even more cool, right? So tell us this thing about this thing about hurricanes then that you did.
Yeah. So this was a paper and a poster actually that I did while I was working in a sleep lab for a couple of years, working with the director with some of her old data in Texas during Hurricane Harvey, which was this massive hurricane that came through, did a lot of damage. And they just happened to be, I guess, in the right place at the right time kind of thing, where they had sleep data on these kids beforehand for a different study entirely. And they realized we can collect data now that the hurricane has happened, and we can do something very unique that a lot of people can't research, because it's hard to do a before and after when you don't know if a natural disaster is going to happen.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. So we were able to collect all this sleep data specifically before and after the hurricane, and the post-traumatic stress symptoms children were experiencing. And we were specifically looking at if your chronotype, which is like your morning or evening preference, impacts how well you cope, at least as a kid, which was really interesting. We hadn't found anything like it, especially in terms of like coping with traumatic events. Tentatively, since it is the first of its kind, we did find that
of course,
morning type people are just better equipped, or they're better at handling and processing these traumatic events. Yeah, and there could be 1,000,001 reasons for that, or it could have been a fluke in our data too, and more data will come out. But it was a really interesting finding.
That's so incredible. And of course, this is how science and research works, is that you find something tentative, but then someone then takes it on and go, okay, then they retest it, don't they? They say, let's see if we can find if this is actual a thing, if it can be replicated again, and then try and control for any confounding factors. That's how science works. That's how research works. So that's incredible serendipity there to actually do that bit of research. And and the fact that there's a lot of nervousness and trepidation about things like data and big data and stuff like that. But if you've got if you accidentally come across some control data like that, like these sleeping patterns of these kids who live in this area that was affected by a hurricane, then they're affected by a hurricane, then you can go look back at that previous study and say, oh, can we do that previous study again now that the hurricane's gone past, and see if there's anything. So that's just so fascinating. That really, really is. And I imagine as well that because Hurricane Harvey, that was as you said, that was a big hurricane. And that can be quite a traumatic impact for a lot of people. So, can you tell me a little bit more about the specificness of kind of maybe the region that you got this data from, or what was your sample size and that kind of stuff?
Oh gosh, it's been a little while since I first did that. I know. Let's see. I think before the hurricane, I want to say they had around like 90 to 100 participants.
Okay.
And then they were not able to get everyone back in after the hurricane because not everyone could or wanted to re-participate, understandably.
Yes, yeah.
So I think if I'm remembering my numbers right, I'm sure I could pull it up if I needed to. It was around 60 participants that were able to do the before and after both. There were a few, I think, who were excluded just as outliers or for other reasons. But yes, and it was in a specific area in Houston. There was like a couple neighborhoods that were really predominantly where they drew from, but it wasn't the hardest hit area, but it wasn't, so far away that they weren't affected.
Sure.
Kind of right in the middle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's obviously there's all kinds of impacts in there. There's like from having your house destroyed and your whole livelihood turned upside down to your neighborhood being affected where there's stress and trauma in the neighborhood, and that kind of like filters through. So there are so many hidden aspects as well, which I think a lot of people don't appreciate. And I think it's something for us, especially us educators in the geography sphere, to kind of bear in mind is this ethical nature of when we teach things like natural hazards. And I'm going to give it a plug, everybody, because why not? For the Teaching Geography Journal that has just come out for summer 2022. I wrote how we could teach natural hazards by being more empathetic and being more sensitive and respectful to the fact that it does affect real people's lives. And and your study, Alexis, it just goes to prove that these impacts, well, that they most certainly do happen. We know that, for example, eco-anxiety is a thing when your world is changed in some way, shape, or form, whether it's through environmental degradation or a natural hazard, it does have an impact. There's data of that. But to have something so specific, and I think it's actually quite, and it sounds a bit pervasive to say a good thing in terms of the study, a good thing that the folks that you focused on weren't necessarily the ones who had their house completely destroyed, but they were on the periphery of the impacts, because it just goes to show that even then you can have this psychological impact of these natural hazards. It must have an impact.
Oh, yes.
So,
yeah. Well, and I think an interesting thing too, that was at least in some of our data, was a lot of it was self-report from the child, and then the parent also reported on those same things. And, you'd get times where the kid would remember it much more dramatically than what had actually happened, or vice versa.
Huh.
Yeah. So there's so much about just like, how did the child perceive what happened to them? That's almost more important than the actual damage.
That's just really, really interesting. And there are so many studies that could spawn off of that. I'm hoping. So even though this was like a fun kind of like serendipitous, almost voluntary kind of thing that you've done, this might end up being one of the most cited things you've ever done. Who knows?
I mean, there's some amazing names of co-authors that are on this paper with me who obviously could talk about this much more accurately than I could. But yeah, I just was so honored that my name was like next to some of these incredible PhDs. Yeah.
That's just so amazing. And so congratulations on that work and with what you're doing
Thank you.
For your master's, and I hope that goes all well.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm going to bring it back to wolves now. For okay, I'm going to change the name of this little feature. Right. So usually it's called barking up the wrong tree, but I'm going to change it to howling up the wrong tree, right?
Okay. I love it.
I don't know. I try to be funny. Sometimes it doesn't always work. Okay, so what this is, folks, for those who don't know, is that I'm going to give Alexis two stories. One of them is true and one of them is false. And Alexis has got just kind of, it's just fun. There's nothing at stake here. It's not testing Alexis' knowledge or anything like that. It's just a bit of fun. Which one's true and which one's false? Okay, so are we ready to go here? I'm going to read the first one out.
Okay.
So this was, so this was a story. It says the sweet true story of a wolf who befriended dogs. And this was it's an American date. So it's not the 2nd of the 20th month. It's the 2nd of February 2015. Okay, so February 2015. So it says here, the author of this extraordinary true story is a gifted wildlife photographer and nature writer living in Alaska. Nick Yarns seeks to tell the story of the black wolf with accuracy, equanimity and forthrightness, but his love for the wild creature who befriend his dogs and those of other residents of Juneau and even forged relationships with some humans is as deep as the Alaskan winter snow. So as the story begins one afternoon, Yarns was skiing in a frozen Meadenhall lake and spotted the unmistakable tracks of a wolf. In the ensuing days, he finally met the enormous lone wolf whom his wife later nicknamed Romeo, and began the now legendary years of interactions between the wild and the so-called civilized. One more paragraph for you. As Yarns notes, and anyone who cares about wildlife understands, wolves have had the short end of humanity's stick for centuries, being blamed for destruction they have not caused and feared for violence they would not commit. And it goes on to say on the lines is that how this wolf made friends with his domestic dogs and even a human or two. And Romeo became a local celebrity, inspiring crowds of onlookers, some of them questionable common sense and others more suspect intentions. So that's the first story. Okay, so is that a true story? Is that this lone wolf who befriended domestic dogs and the humans that owned them, right? Okay, here's the second one. This is dated last year, April 2021. Wild animals will be introduced to Nettershaw Heath near Thetford, so that's this part of the world here, where it's hoped they will settle and breed successfully. Experts say dog walkers in the area should keep their pets in the lead, while small children will be encouraged to remain in the car. The 6 wolves will be released on April the 25th, after which local farmers worried about their livestock will be urged to check their animals regularly and report in that go missing. The last wolf in the UK was shot centuries ago, but there have been growing demands for them to return after the successful rewilding of beavers and wildcats. The main benefit of bringing the fearsome animals is help bring the number of wild deer under control, which in turn will benefit numerous plants and trees. And finally, it says here, Heathland in Suffolk was selected as the ideal wolf habitat, given that the area around Nettershaw Heath is relatively quiet with only a few nearby homes and just one primary school. Right. So there we go. So you have two stories there. One about the lone wolf that befriended domesticated dogs and became a local celebrity, or wolves being reintroduced to Nettershaw Heath, which is literally only about a 20-minute drive that way from me. So what's your thought processes on these?
My thought process is I'm like 80% sure I remember that first story about the lone wolf in Alaska. But I also thought I read something about wolves being reintroduced somewhere in Europe, and it could have been the UK. But I'm more confident about the first one. I think that's the true story.
You think the lone wolf one is a true story?
I think so.
Yes, you are correct. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So this is a true story, folks, and it was made into a book called A Wolf Called Romeo by Nick Yarns, and that really was a true story. And there was a lot of kind of theories about why this lone wolf was happy to go near dogs and humans. You know, one theory was that his mate and pups were maybe killed and left him alone. He's seeking a new pack, you know, and it's an interesting story to read. One, the Nettershaw Heath one, and the clue was it was April, and if I'd given the first part of the date, the 1st of April 2021. I deliberately left that out because you've like, oh crikey, Kit, you just gave it away. Yeah, and I'm just going to show Alexis on the screen. So there was an official looking
wow.
notice board. that was put up in Netshell Heath and everything like that. It was only up on the 1st of April. It wasn't up the other day. But the local media and local press run with it. They thought it was true, and it carried on going for days and days and days. And there was an uproar and things like that, which is sad in a way, you know, that there was an uproar on this, because the article, it says the misunderstanding of wolves. But yeah, like Suffolk Wildlife Trust and Netshell Heath were like, folks, calm down. How many times do I have to tell you? It's an April Fool's joke. Yeah, even the BBC picked it up and then released and then released an article a few days later saying no, they're not being reintroduced. So there you go, folks. What a kudos to whoever thought that as an April Fool's joke.
Yes.
Although sad, because that would have been quite cool.
It would have. But I think the other thing that at least would have given it away if I had seen that post is, like, we know wolves are not going to hunt your children and your small dogs. Like, and any wolf conservator, that's not the right word, but anyone working with those animals and releasing them properly would know that you don't need to keep your children in the car for their safety because there's wolves in the area. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean that was the giveaway, wasn't it? It's like when you go out for a walk in Netshell Heath, you know, keep your dogs on leave and put your children in the car.
Yes.
Yeah, I did think about skipping past that bit, but I thought, no, can you pick up on these little things? Right. One last thing. Well, two last things to finish off. The first one, we're going to spill the beans.
Okay.
Because you put, I love to write and read fantasy novels.
Yes.
Okay. Right. Let's start with reading fantasy novels then. What have you got a favorite or two that you like?
Oh, I can never pick a favorite book, to be honest. I just finished, I shouldn't say just finished, but a couple months ago, I finished the Three Dark Crowns series, which I thought was really interesting. Yes, doesn't it sound ominous? So that was really good. Of course, I'm always a fan of like the Aragon series because the author lived in Livingston, which was 15 minutes from Fowler's.
Yeah.
And his setting was based off of the same mountains that I saw from my windows. So for that reason, I have always loved that series.
So what mountains would? Because I've not read that. So what mountains would that wouldn't have been like this? Wouldn't be the Spanish Pit or the Crazy Mountains or something like that. What were they?
No, it was the Absarokas. That's right.
Or Absarokas or Absarkis, or however they get pronounced. Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. It's the Aragon series, first book, American fan, Chris Bellini. So 1980, born in 1983, began writing a novel after graduating from home at the age of 15. I'm gonna have to look that one up.
Yeah.
I think my kids might like that actually.
Yeah, the books are amazing. The movie is not good. I wouldn't watch the movie. But
okay, I'll take your word for that. Okay. Right, so now I know that my better half and her family like used to write really on purpose, really ridiculous, outrageous fan fiction about Lord of the Rings. I mean, get this amazing. Right. So my wife and her cousins on if you put them together, there's 7 of them, right? So of course, if there's 7 of them and there's 7 members of the fellowship, of course, that you can imagine how this story used to go, right?
I love that.
Yeah, enough said about that, the better. So I mean, you don't have to disclose anything embarrassing or anything like that, Alexis, but can you tell us a little bit about something that you've put to paper and kind of maybe a character or two that you've made?
I could, yeah. I mean, I think the main thing that I'm working on now, that in my wildest dreams, I would love to be officially published. We'll see if that ever happens. But it plays with this idea of like religion and gods and whether or not we can control our own fate, or if predestined path is what we have to travel no matter what we do. So yeah, that's the kind of idea, I guess.
keeping it deliberately vague, but really tempting there to find out more.
Well, thank
you. Okay, you heard it here first, right? Unless of course Alexis chooses to go with a pen name, that's absolutely fine. But if you see Alexis Bahn and these best-selling books, you heard it here first, that we had the author right here on Coffee and Geography in 2022. But yeah, I love that kind of stuff. And as you know, and a lot of folks know, being a sci-fi fancy nerd, Star Trek, that kind of stuff, and Stargate, I love those stories about predestination and stuff like that, and the wibbly wobbly timing, the Doctor Who as well.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to finish off with one last thing. That's we are all geographers, Alexis. So for folks who don't know, this is where we link the guests together using a single word. And Alexis. Yeah, it's all fun. It all works real well. I always have to reassure people on this bit. So what it is, Alexis, that last week we had the lovely Esther Lemons, a good friend of mine who is a podcaster. She runs a podcast called 50 Shades of Gender, talking about gender identity and gender diversity. It's really good. Do check that out, everybody. And she was given a very appropriate word by the guest before, Kat Poe, about genuine. So that was really good for someone who runs a podcast about gender identity. And Esther kind of went with that line for you. And she said the word that she would like you to talk about for 30 seconds in any way, shape or form is the word expression. You just got 30 seconds to riff about the word expression, maybe how you express yourself in your fantasy novels.
Okay, yeah, I'll start with that then, because I do think that's an easy segue, is just in writing. Okay, so I think writing is kind of a classic way people express themselves, and I think it's also one of those universal ways of expressing yourself. Only 17 seconds left, which I think is really interesting. And the scientific writing too. I know it's much more scientific and rigid, but I think there's some level of expression in like research papers and articles and things like that maybe you don't notice, but it's there.
You did great. Yay.
Thank you. I'm just kind of making it up.
Well, it's amazing how many people are like, yeah, I could do this. It's like, and then as soon as they see that I put the time out, they're like, oh my God.
It goes so fast.
Yeah. But yeah, you did that really well. Expression. So not just in the way that you write, and it doesn't just have to be fantasy fiction. It could be non-fiction, and how you go about your passions in your writing and your studies. So love it.
Yeah.
You nailed it, Alexis. You nailed it. Right then. So it's now your turn. So to come up with any word you so wish for our next guest to go for 30 seconds.
I'll go with commitment.
Nice. So the word commitment. So next week, folks, tune in for how we come out with commitment. Okay, and I can already do one. You are the 52nd episode of Coffee and Geography, Alexis. So I've had a bit of a commitment to get past 50 episodes. Wow. Listen to the special 2 weeks ago. Yeah. Okay. Whew. Right, so let's do some shout outs then. So we've already kind of mentioned your family, your mum and dad, Chris and Mary Martha, your sister Delaney, who's probably going to be in the Olympics for the USA at some point, maybe. Good luck, Delaney, with all your sporting endeavours. So is there anybody else you'd like to shout out to?
I feel like I should probably shout out my fiance, Keegan. He's just a good guy, and he's over there finishing his own PhD, so he's plenty busy.
Oh, yeah, Keegan. Oh, well, I know from experience you're coming into a really good family, but you do that already. So yeah, you folks look after each other. Cool. So, and do you have any way? So, if people like the work that you're doing, or is there any way they can contact you? I mean, I know you have a Facebook profile, but I don't know whether that's for family and friends only. But is there any way people can find you on social media?
Yeah, I mean, you can try and find me on Facebook or Instagram. I think it's just my name. I have an ambassador professional Instagram, but I will only be on there for a few more months, and then I pass it on to the next ambassador of Maastricht University. So yeah.
We didn't even have time to talk about that as well. Crikey.
It's not as exciting.
Oh, fair enough. Alexis, I really, really enjoyed catching up with you. This has been so much fun, and
Yes.
yeah, and I know, and I just want to say thank you for you and your family for just being, and I said this in the green room beforehand, for you and your family for being a really important, part of my family's life. Just enriching the experience of what you did with the howlers and everything like that. It's that you've definitely been like a pebble that's like sent ripples in the pond, because now so much of the work that I do, I have that in mind. Those students you give experience to, who I brought over from the UK, we're really close, good friends now because of the experience. I just want to thank you and your family for being that part of our lives. It's been so nice.
Oh my gosh, well, I would agree. I would say it's been wonderful on our end too.
Thank you very much for joining me.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you had fun. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe so more stories and experiences can drop into your favourite podcast app. If you fancy being a guest or have any feedback, follow us on Twitter at coffeegeogpod and send us a DM. Or you could email coffeeandgeog@geogramblings.com. Until next time, keep geogging.